I'm really excited to introduce our next session, which will include proprietary data, first time shown, on return to office, or as Liza prefers to call it, return to in-person. And Liza Mash Levin is the co-founder and CEO of Gable, which powers in-person collaboration at hybrid and remote companies. Before Gable, Liza was a senior product manager lead in Microsoft Azure. She served 5 years in the Israeli Intelligence Corps and received her MBA from Stanford and has a computer science degree from Tel Aviv University. She lives in San Francisco with her partner and 2 young daughters. We could probably chat about raising 2 daughters. And she came all the way out here to tell you about Return to In-Person 2.0. Here you go.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. So I'm Liza. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Gable, as Bernie mentioned. And I'm going to talk to you about how the workplace has changed, how we're going to focus on in-person collaboration in a flexible environment. So this is not proprietary data, but this is interesting data that basically shows that in the past, I would say 2 years, work from home really stabilized. We have an average of 30% of the work week being done remotely. And as you can assume, it goes across quite a lot of industries and so on. And we can see some industries that are leading the way, like tech industries, financial services, professional services, arts and entertainment. But of course, industries like hospitals or transportation are definitely haven't adopted it to the same matter. So at Gable, as Bernie mentioned, what we do is help companies focus on collaboration and engagement. The way that we do it is by providing access to flexible spaces globally for employees and really harnessing tech to help them collaborate in those spaces. And we have partnered with several Stanford professors to do a research about trends in the workplace. So when we set out to do this survey, we've surveyed actually 5,000 US employees between 25 and 40 and 65 of age, all work in all of these sectors. And we set up to answer 3 key questions. The first one would be, what are the current workplace trends, right? The second would be what employees want, how they're behaving in the workplace. And the third, which I think would be very relevant, is what can we take from this and apply to our workplace strategy? So I'll start, before I'll show the results, I'll start with a question. Please raise your hand if you think your company got RTO and workplace strategy figured out yet. Great. So this session is definitely for you. So the important thing for you to know is that you are not alone, right? So RTO is definitely a struggle, and the data shows it. And I think it's actually fascinating to see. So the average of RTO policies per company is 1.4. And think about like how crazy this is. This is the subset of the survey. Basically shows that over 40% of companies actually don't have any return to office policy, whereas some have over 5, okay? So think about this array. And I think what's interesting here, yes?
You mean 5 simultaneously or 5 different iterations?
5 different iterations. Basically had 5 different iterations. And I think that's really interesting, right? Because basically it shows that this is an iterative process, right? That companies are trying to figure this out. Also, this shows that this is actually a very complex process, right? Because there is no one size fits all. And what it actually created, and not only that, it also created different types of strategies, right? And this is just an example here that some companies had a policy that they were fully remote and then fully back in office, fully remote, then hybrid, all configuration that you would like. And that just shows the variability here. And what it created something that we call the workplace strategy spectrum, okay? where if, 5 years ago, everyone were in office, 9 to 5, butts in seats, not even a discussion, right? Here we've created a spectrum where majority of companies are definitely in the middle in the hybrid phase, and hybrid is a really big word that says a lot here. So these policies are changing quite a lot, the employee behavior itself, and I'm sure you can attest to it as well. The good thing that I do want to say for those of you who do have an office is that the office is not dead, okay? It's just transforming the way it is being used today. So currently, according to our survey, over 66% of employees are actually using the office at least once a month. But what's also interesting that out of those 66%, they're using it very differently, and there is a lot of flexibility in place. We didn't even touch upon employees that haven't been to the office for so long, right? But this is one point that I think is very fascinating in terms of how office and flexibility are playing, I would say, different parts. Another interesting data point is saying, we asked, why are you coming to the office? So the reason that people are coming to the office, and I'm sure you're not going to be shocked, it's not because of the office, it's actually because of the people. Right? And I see here nodding faces. So that's part of it, right? We're coming to feel connected, to feel engaged. But then we asked, well, if you are coming, what do you want to see? What do you want to have? So there are two key factors that affect why people are coming besides seeing others. One are actually the amenities, right? Like if I'm leaving my home, I want to be in a nice place that has the amenities that I need in order to work. The other piece, which is interesting, is that I don't want to commute, right? It's not a surprise, but we want a place that is close to our home, not our home, but has high quality amenities that will allow me to work. And that leads me to the, I would say, third part is how do we rethink our spaces, right? And that's, I think, a really interesting challenge because I'm sure, and actually I would love to see some hands, how many of you have a physical office or go to a physical office? Great, so about half, I would say. So I'm sure you've seen that the way that the office has been before might not serve you well now. And I'll show you how the data supports it. But really, the sea of cubicles, this is not the future of offices, right? The focus is much more on collaboration and engagement, right? And I think it's quite an astonishing number that says that over 50% of the time for hybrid workers, they are spending in meetings, right? So the way that we need to configure our office has to be quite different in that sense. And I touched upon this a few times, but flexibility is key in the workplace, right? So basically, one of the things that we've surveyed is, and we have some data on that as well to cross-correlate, is what type of meetings are you doing in this space? And again, what's interesting, the majority of meetings are small. That can be one-on-ones, that can be just myself in a phone booth. And there are some meetings that are larger, right? Those on-sites, off-sites, and so on. And think about how your offices are configured, and are they really supporting that use case? Probably not. And I think this is why there is a big opportunity there. And also a challenge. How do you make an office flexible? I'll give an example of one of our customers, Dropbox. They had an office here in Manhattan. It was 25 people, very low attendance. They decided to let go of the office. They switched to Gable, and they basically helped them use quite a lot of co-working spaces around the area, right? So they transitioned from a dedicated space to co-working space. And the change was quite astonishing to see, which supports this data, because then instead of 25 people that were going to that permanent office, they had 150 people, again, because it's localized. So think about that when you're looking at workplace strategy. Now what, right? I bombarded you with a lot of data. I would say one of the things that we see, which has a huge rise, is the intentionality and collaboration and engagement, and that's the form of events, programs, whether those are on-sites or off-sites, right? And I want to touch upon that because it doesn't mean that your company needs to go and do a company-wide on-site, off-site every quarter. That's not the point. What we do see and what works and helps with collaboration, engagement, and actually increasing high engagement scores are focused on meaningful gatherings, right? So in 2023, 40% of employees from our survey actually went to some on-site and off-site, at least once. But think about how many haven't. And I think that's part of the challenge, right? When you have remote employees, in-office employees, how do you make sure that the remote will not feel second-class citizen, right? How do you make sure that they're still engaged as well? We also see this in the data. And I'm sure you feel the same, that there is quite a lot of focus on that, on how do I bring my team, my department, how do I make sure that when I hire new employees, they still feel engaged and connected. We've seen this quite a lot, actually, with sales teams when they're hiring junior people, that they really want to make sure that there is some in-person focus there. Lastly, I would say is that the important thing that we see is that you do need to focus on local. Like I hear a lot, and I talk to workplace leaders on a daily basis. Do I need to transition to a huge travel budget? No, you can do a lot of things locally. And I think that's actually the most effective way to do it, right? So we've seen that over 80% of offsite happened within a 1-hour commute of those people and lasted less than a day. So you don't need 3-day conferences in order to make sure that your team is actually feeling connected, engaged, and gets work done. In addition, one last thing that I would suggest would be focusing on smaller gatherings that are focused on the department or the team itself. We see that those are the events that gather the highest success, I would say, and are easier and more cost-effective to actually generate. So I'll leave you with 3 key takeaways, right? One, return to office is a spectrum. It's not something that's going to happen once. It's going to happen quite differently for different companies. And there is no one solution that fits all. What is very important, and we talk about this every day with our companies, that it shouldn't be a top-down approach. I need people in the office, and that's it. It should be something that really helps your culture of the company and encourages employees to come and collaborate together. The second piece is, again, offices are not dead, not by any means. They're just transforming. And we should all think how to support meaningful connections and gatherings in the offices. And lastly, I would say, events is really the way, events and gatherings, and this is the way to go to activate both remote and hybrid employees there. Thank you. Questions? Any questions? Or you're floored? Yes? Yeah, 100%. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. Of the companies that you see maybe changing their return to office strategy over time, is there like a trend, or would you see certain challenges that they face, or a particular area that they're trying to revise that part of the strategy?
Yeah, so I think there are two things that we see stand out. Companies that are growing and hiring junior people, as I mentioned. There is a big transition of making sure that they're not just being hired remotely, but they're hired close to a team that they can meet, whether they have an office or not. But it's really important to create this cluster. We see this more and more, that there is more intentionality in hiring, I would say. And the second piece, there is a desire for more structure, right? So we do see companies that transition from, we suggest you to come to the office twice a week, to you have to come to the office twice a week. We will measure this data and get insights on the effectiveness of it. I would say. Those are the trends that we see. Yes?
I have a question for you. On some of the data, are you seeing any geographical differences between employers in major cities where you have, right,
100%.
co-working spaces
Yeah.
versus more in the suburban areas?
Definitely.
But I'm very curious about the geographical distribution of need.
Definitely. I would say definitely major cities have higher demand. It also, like you, I'm sure you know, it alludes to how people are actually living. New York, small apartments, people live with roommates. They want to go. They want to go outside of their home. But if you live in Denver or somewhere that you have a home that you can have a better set up office, you have much less of that, I would say, for individual use for co-working spaces. What we do see in those, I would say, secondary markets is focus more on meetings and collaboration and more intentionality around that. Because that means that those people will need to commute to a centralized location versus here that there's so many options, right? So it's a bit different in that sense. Did it answer your question? Perfect. Yes?
Can you operate your office that one cannot operate in the house?
What do you mean? Like what, Gable?
Technology, anything that makes it more interesting for one definitely comes to
Great question. So one of the differences that we do, and that's part of our platform basically, instead of, we partner with a lot of co-working spaces, right? Like consider this as like Airbnb for co-working, right? So we have a marketplace of co-working spaces that we partner with really everyone that we know that has a need that onboards to Gable. And from the company side, they have a really great option to have only one provider that just work with us, basically. And they can choose their employees, just contact one co-working provider, basically, which is us, versus thousands, right? So for companies, that have employees in remote locations and they're traveling and they might not have, a WeWork or anything like that, they can use our network with local locations, basically. The second piece I would say is data. So we gather a lot of data and we integrate with the entire ecosystem of tools that you have, whether this is your Google, your Okta, your HRIS provider. So a lot of the signals we also ingest as well and provide you insight on that. Of course. Any other questions? Yes?
For your employee-facing, I guess, platform for booking, are you also trying to help the companies encourage people to book
Yeah.
and kind of helping them create that virtual?
So that's a really great question. One of the things that are challenging when you have remote employees, even if they live close by, it's the organization or knowing who is going when and where. So that's part of the advantages that we show. Like you can see who is coming when and where. Visibility is a key piece in everything that wants to encourage people to come into an office. We see, for example, even company leaders doing a roadshow, and they're like, "I'm going to be in this location. Come to here." Also, visibility the same way if you have an office. Like visibility provides a lot of value in that sense and helps in creating habits as well. Great. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the questions and thank you for your time.